Lesson 78. Situation. What would you do if you saw someone taking something from a shop without paying?
If I saw someone taking something from a shop without paying, I'd inform the manager of the shop.
What do people normally do in situations like that?
People normally do nothing in situations like that.
Do police officers often find themselves in dangerous situations?
Yes, police officers often find themselves in dangerous situations.
Suppose. First. What do you suppose would happen if there were suddenly no water in the world?
I suppose we'd all die of thirst if there were suddenly no water in the world.
If you only slept 2 hours tonight, how do you suppose you'd feel tomorrow morning?
If I only slept 2 hours tonight, I suppose I'd feel very tired tomorrow morning.
Supposing today were Sunday, where'd you be now?
Supposing today was Sunday, I'd be in church now.
Supposing you lost your passport, what would you do?
Supposing I lost my passport, I'd immediately tell the police.
Hotter and hotter. More and more. Does it get hotter and hotter as we go towards the north of Europe?
No, it doesn't get hotter and hotter as we go towards the north of Europe. It gets colder and colder.
Do people usually become richer and richer as they become older?
Yes, people usually become richer and richer as they become older.
Why?
Because they usually earn more and more money.
Does good wine usually become cheaper and cheaper as it becomes older?
No, good wine doesn't usually become cheaper and cheaper as it becomes older. It usually becomes more and more expensive.
Ready. Marriage. How long does it take you to get ready to go out in the morning?
It takes me about 30 minutes to get ready to go out in the morning.
When do you think you'll be ready to take the exam at the end of this book?
I think I'll be ready to take the exam at the end of this book in about 3 weeks' time.
Are you always ready to lend people money?
No, I'm not always ready to lend people money.
Do you think most people are ready for marriage when they are 18 years old?
No, I don't think most people are ready for marriage when they are 18 years old.
Whereabouts? If the government of your country decided to build a new national sports stadium, whereabouts do you think it should be?
If the government of my country decided to build a new national sports stadium, I think it should be in Swansea.
Describe. Description. Just. Describe someone you know, please. One of your family or friends.
I'll describe my uncle. He's tall and thin, he has black hair, etc.
Describe the place where you live.
The place where I live is by the sea, it's quite large, there are some factories just outside it, etc.
What's he doing?
He's describing the place where he lives.
Do you think it's a good enough description?
Yes, I think it's a good enough description.
Correct. Incorrect. Is it correct to say, the book was writing by him?
No, it isn't correct to say the book was writing by him. We must say, the book was written by him.
Is it correct that 4 plus 5 equals 11?
No, it isn't correct that 4 plus 5 equals 11. It's incorrect.
As soon as. Over. What did you do as soon as you came into the classroom?
I sat down as soon as I came into the classroom.
What'll you do as soon as the lesson is over?
I'll stand up, go home, etc. as soon as the lesson is over.
When you lend something, like money for example, do you prefer the other person to give it back on a certain date or just as soon as possible?
When I lend something, like money for example, I prefer the other person to give it back just as soon as possible.
Strange. Who's the strangest person you know?
The strangest person I know is somebody I work with.
They equals he or she. When do we use the words they, them, etc. to talk about just one person?
We use the words they, them, etc. when we don't know if the person is a man or woman.
If someone lost their passport, what advice would you give them?
If someone lost their passport, I'd tell them that they should immediately go to the police.
Shut. Shut up. Be quiet. What verb can we use instead of the verb to close?
We can use the verb to shut instead of the verb to close.
If some friends were talking loudly while you were trying to study, what would you say?
If some friends were talking loudly while I was trying to study, I'd say, "Could you be quiet, please?"
And if they carried on talking loudly even after that, what might you then say?
If they carried on talking loudly even after that, I might then say, "Shut up."
Choose. Do you always choose your clothes yourself, or does someone else ever help you to choose them?
Yes, I always choose my clothes myself.
If you had to choose between having £10,000 now or £40,000 in 10 years' time, which should you choose?
If I had to choose between having £10,000 now or £40,000 in 10 years' time, I'd choose to have £10,000 now.
Why?
Because I need the money now.
Lesson 79. Recognize. Do you think you'd be able to recognize me if we met each other again in 30 years' time?
No, I don't think I'd be able to recognize you if we met each other again in 30 years' time.
Would you say you were good at recognizing people after not having seen them for several years?
No, I wouldn't say I was good at recognizing people after not having seen them for several years.
Rather, would you say you spoke English rather well now?
Yes, I'd say I spoke English rather well now.
Would rather. What can we say instead of, I would prefer to drink tea?
We can say, I would rather drink tea, instead of, I would prefer to drink tea.
Would you rather have a cold drink than a hot drink at the moment?
Yes, I'd rather have a cold drink than a hot drink at the moment.
Which would you rather do this evening? Read a book, watch television, or go to the cinema?
I'd rather read a book than watch television or go to the cinema this evening.
Would you rather go on a long flight or a long train journey?
I'd rather go on a long flight than on a long train journey.
Faith. Christian. Do you have very much faith in your government?
Yes, I have a lot of faith in my government.
About how old is the Christian faith?
The Christian faith is about 2,000 years old.
Will and to be going to. Predict. Prediction. Just this moment. Tell me one common use of the future simple, please.
One common use of the future simple is to communicate that we have just this moment decided to do something.
Give me an example, please.
Sorry, I forgot to bring the money for you. I'll bring it tomorrow, I promise.
Tell me another common use of the future simple, please.
Another common use of the future simple is to make a prediction.
Give me an example, please.
I can't remember what she looks like, but I'm sure I'll recognize her when I see her.
Tell me one common use of to be going to, please.
One common use of to be going to is to make a prediction using information we already have.
Give me an example, please.
Be careful, that wine glass is going to fall off the table.
Tell me another common use of to be going to, please.
Another common use of to be going to is to communicate a future intention, something that we have already decided to do.
Give me an example, please.
I'm going to go to the cinema next Saturday.
Tell me what you have decided to do this afternoon or this evening, please.
This afternoon, I'm going to visit a friend, etc.
Stairs. Upstairs. Downstairs. Living room. Lift. In a house, are the bedrooms usually downstairs?
No, in a house the bedrooms aren't usually downstairs, they're usually upstairs.
And is the living room usually upstairs?
No, the living room isn't usually upstairs, it's usually downstairs.
If you had to get to a room that was on the 10th floor of a building, would you take the stairs or the lift?
If I had to get to a room that was on the 10th floor of a building, I'd take the lift.
Lip. Lipstick. Is this my top lip?
No, it isn't your top lip, it's your bottom lip.
Do you think women look better with or without lipstick?
I think women look better with lipstick.
System. What system of government do you have in your country?
We have a democratic system of government in my country.
Sail. Sailor. Is sailing a popular sport in your country?
Yes, sailing's a popular sport in my country.
Would you like to be a sailor?
No, I wouldn't like to be a sailor.
Lesson 80. Emphatic do. Deny. Exclamation. Stress. I do speak English. I do like this book. When do we use the auxiliary verb do in a positive sentence with the present simple tense?
We use the auxiliary verb do in a positive sentence with the present simple tense when we want to be emphatic.
When do we usually use the emphatic do?
We usually use the emphatic do when we want to deny something that someone has said because we know it is not true.
Give me an example, please.
For example, if somebody says, "You don't eat enough vegetables," I can reply, "Yes, I do eat enough vegetables."
Reply to this sentence using the emphatic form, please. You don't know what I've got in my pocket.
Yes, I do know what you've got in your pocket.
Tell me another use of the emphatic do, please.
Another use of the emphatic do is in an exclamation.
Give me an example, please.
I do hate noisy children, and she does write beautifully.
Reply to this sentence using an emphatic form in the past, please. He didn't cycle home yesterday.
Yes, he did cycle home yesterday.
Reply to these sentences using emphatic forms, please. You can't read quickly.
Yes, I can read quickly.
The weather's been good.
No, the weather has not been good.
She doesn't love her family.
Yes, she does love her family.
He came to school early.
No, he didn't come to school early.
We shouldn't tell him the news.
Yes, we should tell him the news.
Hit. Arrest. What am I doing?
You're hitting the table with your hand.
Have you ever hit your head getting into a car?
Yes, I've hit my head getting into a car.
What would happen if you hit a policeman?
If I hit a policeman, he'd arrest me.
Have you ever seen anyone arrested?
Yes, I've seen someone arrested.
Fair, fairly, just, moderate, unfair. What are the 5 meanings of the word fair?
The 5 meanings of the word fair are fair hair, industrial and agricultural fairs, just, moderate, and funfair.
Do people become darker and darker in hair colour as we go towards the north of Europe?
No, people don't become darker and darker in hair colour as we go towards the north of Europe. They become fairer and fairer.
Have you ever been to an industrial or agricultural fair?
Yes, I've been to an industrial or agricultural fair.
What kind?
I've been to an agricultural fair.
If I asked everyone in this room 20 questions, but only asked you 2, would that be fair?
No, if you asked everyone in this room 20 questions, but only asked me 2, it wouldn't be fair, it'd be unfair.
Do they ever have a fun fair in this town?
Yes, they sometimes have a fun fair in this town.
Do you speak English fairly well now?
Yes, I speak English fairly well now.
Pleasure. Is it a great pleasure for you to get up in the morning?
Yes, it's a great pleasure for me to get up in the morning.
Why?
Because I find my work interesting.
Do you think it's possible for life to be full of pleasure all the time?
No, I don't think it's possible for life to be full of pleasure all the time.
Experiment. Do you think it's wrong to use animals for experiments?
Yes, I think it's wrong to use animals for experiments.
Discover. When was America discovered by Europeans, and who discovered it?
America was discovered by Europeans in 1492 by Christopher Columbus, or by Leif Erikson about the year 1000.
Is the Internet useful for discovering new information?
Yes, the Internet is useful for discovering new information.
Lesson 81. Scientist. Would you like to be a scientist?
Yes, I'd like to be a scientist.
Why?
Because you can discover many new things.
Tissue. What do we call a paper handkerchief?
We call a paper handkerchief a tissue.
Division. How many football divisions are there in your country?
There are 4 football divisions in my country.
Which division's your hometown in?
My hometown's in the 1st division.
In. Within. On the other hand. The time now is 6 o'clock. If I went out of the room and said I'll be back in an hour, at what time would I return?
If you went out of the room and said, I'll be back in an hour, you'd return at 7 o'clock.
If, on the other hand, I went out of the room and said I'll be back within an hour, at what time would I return?
If, on the other hand, you went out of the room and said, I'll be back within an hour, you'd return at any time between now and 7 o'clock.
Do you think life will be discovered on other planets within the next 100 years?
Yes, I think life will be discovered on other planets within the next 100 years.
Main. Mainly. Shopping. Which is the main shopping street in this town?
King Street is the main shopping street in this town.
Do you think that the difference between the people of one country and those of another is mainly a question of language?
No, I don't think the difference between the people of one country and those of another is mainly a question of language. I think there are other differences.
Sing, sang, sung. What are the 3 forms of sing?
The 3 forms of sing are sing, sang, sung.
Why are people so often in the habit of singing to themselves in the bathroom?
People are so often in the habit of singing to themselves in the bathroom, maybe because their voices sound better in the bathroom.
If you sang in public for a day, in the street for example, how much do you think you'd earn?
If I sang in public for a day, I think I'd earn about £100.
Have you ever sung in public?
Yes, I've sung in public.
Profit, loss, business. If you bought a business for £1 million and sold it again later for £250,000, would you be making a profit?
No, if I bought a business for £1 million and sold it again later for £250,000, I wouldn't be making a profit. I'd be making a loss.
How much would your loss be?
My loss would be £750,000.
Future perfect. I will have eaten. When do we use the future perfect?
We use the future perfect when we are thinking about time before and up to a specific point in the future.
Give me an example, please.
When you arrive at my house, I will have cooked dinner.
What does that sentence mean?
That sentence means that I will finish cooking dinner before you arrive at my house. When you arrive, dinner will be ready.
What's the difference between these two sentences? At 9 o'clock, I will eat my dinner, and at 9 o'clock, I will have eaten my dinner.
The difference between those two sentences is that at 9 o'clock, I will eat my dinner means I will start to eat my dinner at 9 o'clock. Whereas at 9 o'clock, I will have eaten my dinner means that my dinner will already be finished at 9 o'clock.
Will you have had your dinner before midnight tonight?
Yes, I'll have had my dinner before midnight tonight.
Will we have left this room in 3 hours' time?
Yes, we'll have left this room in 3 hours' time.
At 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, will you already have got up?
Yes, at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll already have got up.
Will most shops in this town have shut before 11 o'clock this evening?
Yes, most shops in this town will have shut before 11 o'clock this evening.
Minister. Prime. What's a government minister?
A government minister is someone who has a very important job in the government.
Give me some examples, please.
Minister for Agriculture, Foreign Minister, etc.
What do some countries call the most important minister in the government?
Some countries call the most important minister in the government the Prime Minister.
Guess. Are you usually able to guess a person's age?
No, I'm not usually able to guess a person's age.
Coin. Have you got any coins in your pocket or bag at the moment?
Yes, I've got some coins in my pocket at the moment.
Cheers. In which situations do we say cheers?
We say cheers to express good wishes when we have a drink with somebody, to say thank you, and to say goodbye.
Lesson 82. Road. What's the past of ride?
The past of ride is road.
If you rode from here to the next town by bicycle, about how long would it take you?
If I rode from here to the next town by bicycle, it'd take me about 2 hours.
Decrease. Does the temperature decrease as we move from spring to summer?
No, the temperature doesn't decrease as we move from spring to summer. It increases.
Join. Joint. Shoulder. Elbow. Do you have to join a library before you can start borrowing books?
Yes, you have to join a library before you can start borrowing books.
If we join two pieces of wood together, like this, what do we make?
If we join two pieces of wood together like that, we make a cross.
What joint of the arm is this?
That joint of the arm is the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist.
Noon. What's another word for midday?
Another word for midday is noon.
E.g. equals exempli gratia equals for example. Abbreviation. What are the letters e.g. the abbreviation of?
The letters e.g. are the abbreviation of exempli gratia.
When do we use these letters?
We use these letters in writing, but not in speaking.
Here you are. There he is. Hand. Structure. Finally. What can we say when we hand something to somebody?
When we hand something to somebody, we can say, here you are.
When you finally find something after trying to find it for a long time, what can you say?
When you finally find something after trying to find it for a long time, you can say, ah, here it is.
State. Fill in. Application form. Birth. Occupation. Do you pay taxes to the state?
Yes, I pay taxes to the state.
Is this room in a good state or a bad state?
This room's in a good state.
When you fill in a passport application form, what must you state?
When I fill in a passport application form, I must state my name, my address, my date of birth, my occupation, etc.
Statement. Signature. When you make a formal written statement to the police, do you have to put your signature at the end?
Yes, when you make a formal written statement to the police, you have to put your signature at the end.
Download. Program. What kind of things can we download from the internet?
We can download programs, songs, films, etc.
Drunk. Fight. What happens if someone drinks too much alcohol?
If someone drinks too much alcohol, they get drunk.
Have you ever seen two people fighting each other in the street?
Yes, I've seen two people fighting each other in the street.
Where? What happened?
They were outside the pub, and they hit each other.
Do some people get into fights when they're drunk?
Yes, some people get into fights when they're drunk.
Probability. Do you think the probability of another world war has increased or decreased in the last 20 years?
I think the probability of another world war has increased in the last 20 years.
Mind. Brain. Change one's mind. Brainy. Abstract. Sense. What's the difference between mind and brain?
The difference between mind and brain is that we use mind in the abstract sense, whereas we generally use brain in the physical sense.
Are you in the habit of changing your mind a lot?
No, I'm not in the habit of changing my mind a lot.
Do adults have bigger brains than young children?
Yes, adults have bigger brains than young children.
Who's the brainiest member of your family?
I'm the brainiest member of my family.
Criminal. What happens to criminals if the police catch them?
If the police catch criminals, they arrest them and take them to the police station.
Gun. Do you have to have permission from the state to own a gun in your country?
Yes, you have to have permission from the state to own a gun in my country.
Civilized. Do you think the world's more civilized nowadays than it was in the past?
No, I don't think the world's more civilized nowadays than it was in the past. I think it's less civilized.
So far. How many people do you think you've spoken to so far today?
I think I've spoken to about 3 people so far today.
What does the expression, so far, so good, mean?
The expression, so far, so good, means that somebody has not experienced any problems up to now.
Give me an example, please.
I'm enjoying my new job. So far, so good. Lesson 83. Short answers with auxiliary verbs. Yes, I can. Yes, I would. Yes, I am. Yes, I have. Yes, I do. Answer the following questions with short answers. Will we still be here in 2 minutes' time?
Yes, we will.
Would you need any money if you went to the cinema and had a free ticket?
No, I wouldn't.
Can you swim?
Yes, I can.
Should you be very careful when you cross the road?
Yes, you should.
Could you read when you were 3 years old?
No, I couldn't.
Am I the teacher?
Yes, you are.
Have you got any shoes on your feet?
Yes, I have.
Do you like this part of the country?
Yes, I do.
Did you eat dinner at home last night?
Yes, I did.
Does she speak her language during the lesson?
No, she doesn't.
Did people believe the world was round in the old days?
No, they didn't.
Why don't we use short answers in the lessons?
We don't use short answers in the lessons because it's important for us to practice speaking as much as possible.
Rose. What's the past of rise?
The past of rise is rose.
Did the sun rise early this morning?
No, the sun didn't rise early this morning.
How high? Mile. Decimal point. Kilometre. Population. About how high are the walls of this room in feet?
The walls of this room are about 10 feet high.
About how long is this table in feet?
This table is about 2 feet long.
If I am 5 feet 11 inches tall, about how tall do you think you are in feet and inches?
If you are 5 feet 11 inches tall, I think I'm about 5 feet 7 inches tall.
About how many kilometers are there in a mile?
There are about 1.6 kilometers in a mile.
If a kilometer equals about 0.6 of a mile, how far is it from here to the nearest town in miles?
If a kilometer equals about 0.6 of a mile, it's about 40 miles from here to the nearest town.
What's the population of this town?
The population of this town is about 100,000 people.
Hurt, hurt, hurt. Fell. Fall over. What's the past of fall?
The past of fall is fell.
If you fell over while you were running along the street, might you hurt yourself?
Yes, if I fell over while I was running along the street, I might hurt myself.
Have you ever been hurt while playing sport?
No, I've never been hurt while playing sport.
If you hurt yourself very badly, where'd you be taken to?
If I hurt myself very badly, I'd be taken to hospital.
Glad. Would you be glad to hear that you had failed an exam?
No, I wouldn't be glad to hear that I'd failed an exam. I'd be very unhappy.
Would you be glad if you were told you had won the lottery?
Yes, I'd be glad if I were told I'd won the lottery.
Sick. Unwell. Vomit. What are two other words for ill?
Two other words for ill are sick and unwell.
What's another meaning of to be sick besides to be unwell?
Another meaning of to be sick besides to be unwell is to vomit.
What does this sentence probably mean? The little boy was sick in the car.
That sentence probably means that the little boy vomited in the car.
What does this sentence probably mean? The little boy didn't go to school because he was sick.
That sentence probably means that the little boy didn't go to school because he was unwell.
Repair. When things break, do you normally try to repair them, or do you just throw them away?
When things break, I normally try to repair them.
Roof. What do we call the top covering of a house?
We call the top covering of a house the roof.
Wind. Windy. Do sailing boats move faster in strong winds?
Yes, sailing boats move faster in strong winds.
Is it a windy day today?
No, it isn't a windy day today.
Court. Just as. Platform. What are the three forms of catch?
The three forms of catch are catch, caught, caught.
When was the last time you caught a cold?
The last time I caught a cold was 3 months ago.
Have you ever caught a train just as it was leaving the platform?
Yes, I've sometimes caught a train just as it was leaving the platform.
Lesson 84. Direct speech and indirect speech. Direct speech. I said, the room is large. indirect speech. I said that the room was large. Report. Refer. Inverted commas. Mr. Brown said, I like warm weather. Mr. Brown said that he liked warm weather. What are the two ways in which we can repeat what someone has said?
The two ways in which we can repeat what someone has said are by giving the exact words of the speaker or by reporting what the speaker said.
What do we call these two ways?
We call these two ways direct speech and indirect speech.
Give me an example of direct speech, please.
Mr. Brown said, I like warm weather.
Give me an example of indirect speech, please.
Mr. Brown said that he liked warm weather.
What do we do with the tenses when we change direct speech into indirect speech?
When we change direct speech into indirect speech, we generally move the verb into the past.
Give me an example.
The teacher said, the room is large. The teacher said that the room was large.
What do we do if a verb is already in the past?
If a verb is already in the past, it often remains unchanged, but sometimes we put it further into the past.
What do we do with the word will when we change direct speech into indirect speech?
When we change direct speech into indirect speech, we change the word will to would.
Give me an example, please.
She said that John would go to London next year.
Right. I will now make some statements, and I want you to tell me what I said, using indirect speech. I swim every day. What did I say?
You said that you swam every day.
She is speaking to you. What did I say?
You said that she was speaking to me.
I have just taken the pen from the table. What did I say?
You said that you had just taken the pen from the table.
I think I will go to London tomorrow. What did I say?
You said that you thought you would go to London tomorrow.
They had books in their hands when they came into the room. What did I say?
You said that they had books in their hands when they came into the room.
I ate too much for dinner. What did I say?
You said you had eaten too much for dinner.
Do we use inverted commas for indirect speech?
No, we don't use inverted commas for indirect speech.
Is it generally necessary to use the word that when we use indirect speech?
No, it isn't generally necessary to use the word that when we use indirect speech.
Give me an example, please.
He said that the room was large. He said the room was large.
Flat. Did people in the old days believe the world was round?
No, people in the old days didn't believe the world was round. They believed it was flat.
Which is one of the flattest parts of this country?
One of the flattest parts of this country is East Anglia.
Pity. What a pity. Picnic. Phrase. Would you think it was a great pity if you went for a picnic in the country and it rained?
Yes, I'd think it was a great pity if I went for a picnic in the country and it rained.
What kind of people do you pity most?
I pity ill people most.
Translate this phrase. What a pity. Blow, blew, blown. What are the three forms of blow?
The three forms of blow are blow, blew, blown.
Have you ever been blown off your feet by the wind?
Yes, I've been blown off my feet by the wind.
Lesson 85. Consider. Decision. What do you consider to be the best occupation in the world?
I consider an actress to be the best occupation in the world.
Why must we consider carefully before making an important decision?
We must consider carefully before making an important decision because if we don't consider carefully, we might make a big mistake.
whatever, whenever, wherever, whoever, limit, unlimited, most of. What's the difference between the words what and whatever?
The difference between the words what and whatever is that we use the word what in a limited sense, whereas we use the word whatever in a more unlimited sense.
If you could buy whatever you wanted, what would you buy?
If I could buy whatever I wanted, I'd buy a car.
Can you go for a holiday whenever you like?
No, I can't go for a holiday whenever I like.
Why not?
Because I have to work for most of the year.
If you could go wherever you liked in the world, where'd you go?
If I could go wherever I liked in the world, I'd go to the Caribbean.
If you could meet whoever you wanted in the world, who would you prefer to meet?
If I could meet whoever I wanted in the world, I'd prefer to meet the President of the United States of America.
Truth. Lie. Tell the truth. Tell a lie. Honest. Do you always tell the truth?
No, I don't always tell the truth. Sometimes I tell lies.
Why not?
Because it's sometimes necessary to tell lies in order not to be unpleasant.
Do newspapers always tell the truth?
No, newspapers don't always tell the truth. Sometimes they tell lies.
Why do they sometimes tell lies?
They sometimes tell lies because they want to sell more newspapers.
Miss. What's the opposite of the verb to catch?
The opposite of the verb to catch is to miss.
If I threw my pen to you, do you think you'd catch it or miss it?
If you threw your pen to me, I think I'd miss it.
Are you in the habit of missing trains and buses?
Yes, I'm in the habit of missing trains and buses.
Why?
Because I always leave everything to the last minute and then have to hurry.
How long do you have to be away from home before you begin to miss your family and friends?
I have to be away from home for about 1 month before I begin to miss my family and friends.
Did you miss the last lesson? If so, why?
No, I didn't miss the last lesson.
Union. Trade union. Organization. In favor of. Pay. Wages. Do you think that a union of all the countries in Europe, or South America, etc., will ever be possible?
Yes, I think a union of all the countries in Europe, or South America, will one day be possible.
What is a trade union?
A trade union is an organisation composed of workers from a particular industry. It protects the workers and fights to improve their pay and conditions.
Are you in favour of trade unions?
Yes, I'm in favour of trade unions.
Rope. Climb. What can we use rope for?
We can use rope for climbing mountains, pulling things, etc.
What did you see if you climbed the stairs to the top of this building?
If I climbed the stairs to the top of this building, I'd see other buildings.
Is it easy to climb to the top of the music industry and stay there?
No, it isn't easy to climb to the top of the music industry and stay there. It's difficult.
Court. Look for. If you lost your keys, where would you look for them first?
If I lost my keys, I would look for them first in my house.
Where do people go when they are looking for justice?
People go to the law courts when they are looking for justice.
Judge. Would you like the job of a judge?
Yes, I'd like the job of a judge.
Dark. Darken. Short. Shorten. Wide. Widen. Width. Length. Lengthen. Strength. Strengthen. Friendship. How do we form verbs from certain adjectives or nouns?
We form verbs from certain adjectives or nouns by adding the letters en.
Give me some examples, please.
Dark, darken, short, shorten, etc.
What does the verb to darken mean?
The verb to darken means to make darker or to get darker.
If our trousers are too long, what must we do to them?
If our trousers are too long, we must shorten them.
Do the days lengthen or shorten as we go towards summer?
The days lengthen as we go towards summer.
Do you think sport can strengthen the friendship between different countries?
Yes, I think sport can strengthen the friendship between different countries.
How many syllables must an adjective or noun have in order for us to form a verb from it?
An adjective or noun must have only one syllable in order for us to form a verb from it.
Can we form verbs from all adjectives and nouns of one syllable?
No, we can't form verbs from all adjectives and nouns of one syllable.
Give me an example of a one-syllable adjective from which we can't form a verb.
An example of a one-syllable adjective from which we can't form a verb is small.
Lesson 86. Obvious. Give me a sentence with the word obvious.
It is obvious from what he says that he is not interested in the job.
Do small children sometimes say they aren't tired when they obviously are?
Yes, small children sometimes say they aren't tired when they obviously are.
Why?
Because they don't want to go to bed, etc.
Ache. Toothache. Stomachache. Earache. Headache. What is an ache?
An ache is a continuous physical pain, such as toothache, headache, stomachache, earache, etc.
What might you get if you ate too much?
I might get stomachache if I ate too much.
Where should you go if you get toothache?
I should go to the dentist's if I get toothache.
What kind of things give you a headache?
The kind of things that give me a headache are noise, too much work, hot weather, etc.
Rule. Confuse. Who was the last person to rule your country?
The king was the last person to rule my country.
Do you understand the rules of football?
Yes, I understand the rules of football.
Do the rules of English grammar sometimes confuse you?
Yes, the rules of English grammar sometimes confuse me.
Do you find computers confusing?
Yes, I find computers confusing.
Would you be confused if I suddenly walked out of the room for no reason and didn't come back?
Yes, I'd be confused if you suddenly walked out of the room for no reason and didn't come back.
Ought. What can we say instead of should?
We can say ought instead of should.
Give me an example, please.
I ought to call my dad because it's his birthday.
When we borrow money, ought we to pay it back as soon as possible?
Yes, when we borrow money, we ought to pay it back as soon as possible.
What ought we to do before crossing the road?
We ought to look both ways before crossing the road.
Do you think children ought to be allowed to go to bed whenever they want?
No, I don't think children ought to be allowed to go to bed whenever they want.
Rough. Smooth. Surface. Seasick. Roughly. Is the surface of this table rough?
No, the surface of this table isn't rough. It's smooth.
When you travel by boat, do you prefer the sea to be rough?
No, when I travel by boat, I don't prefer the sea to be rough. I prefer it to be calm.
Why?
Because a rough sea makes me feel seasick.
If someone tells you that they're feeling rough, what do they mean?
If someone tells me that they're feeling rough, they mean they aren't feeling very well.
Roughly how many people would you say there were in Spain?
I'd say there were roughly 50 million people in Spain.
Do you like rough weather?
No, I don't like rough weather. I prefer calm weather.
Which do you think is the roughest sport one can play?
I think maybe rugby is the roughest sport one can play.
Ground. Level. Underground. Railway. Ground floor. Grounds. What do we usually mean by the word ground?
By the word ground, we usually mean the surface of the land.
Are there any shops in this town built below the level of the ground, or ground level?
Yes, there are some shops in this town built below the level of the ground.
Where?
In the centre of the town.
When a table is not level, what must we do?
When a table is not level, we must put something under one of its legs.
Has this town got an underground railway?
Yes, this town's got an underground railway.
What's on the ground floor of this building?
There's an office on the ground floor of this building.
Where's the biggest football ground in this town?
The biggest football ground in this town is in Wembley.
Are the grounds of some famous old buildings in this country open to the public?
Yes, the grounds of some famous old buildings in this country are open to the public.
Educate. Educated. How can parents start educating their children before they go to school?
Parents can start educating their children before they go to school by teaching them to read and write, etc.
What do we mean by an educated person?
By an educated person, we mean somebody who has continued their studies to a high level.
Making a suggestion. Tell me 4 common ways in which we can make a suggestion, please.
4 common ways in which we can make a suggestion are 1. Shall we wait for him? 2. Let's wait for him. 3. How or what about waiting for him? 4. Why don't we wait for him?
The imperative. Order. How do we make the imperative in English?
We make the imperative in English by using the infinitive without to.
Give me some examples, please.
Give me the book. Do it now. Have a nice day.
How do we make a negative imperative?
We make a negative imperative by putting the word don't before the infinitive.
Give me some examples, please.
Don't give him the book. Don't be late. Don't forget to email me.
Lesson 87. Overeat. Oversleep. Overwork. Overcook. Undercook. Overpay. Underpay. What does it sometimes mean when we put the word over before a verb?
When we put the word over before a verb, it sometimes means to do something excessively.
Give me some examples, please.
Oversleep, overeat, etc.
What might happen if we overate?
If we overate, we might get stomachache.
Have you ever been late for work or school because you've overslept?
Yes, I've been late for work or school because I've overslept.
Are nurses and doctors in busy hospitals often overworked?
Yes, nurses and doctors in busy hospitals are often overworked.
What are the contraries of overcook and overpay?
The contraries of overcook and overpay are undercook and underpay.
What do we mean when we say that somebody is underpaid for the work they do?
When we say that somebody is underpaid for the work they do, we mean they are not paid enough for the work they do.
Charge. Serious. Commit. Battery. Service. What happens to people who are charged by the police with committing serious crimes?
People who are charged by the police with committing serious crimes are first taken to court, and then, if they are found guilty, they are sent to prison.
How would you feel if you were told to charge the enemy in a battle?
If I were told to charge the enemy in a battle, I'd probably feel very afraid.
If you had to be in charge of a big business, what kind of business would you choose?
If I had to be in charge of a big business, I'd choose an entertainment business.
If you were seriously overcharged in a restaurant, would you ask to speak to the manager?
Yes. If I was seriously overcharged in a restaurant, I'd ask to speak to the manager.
Have you ever refused to pay the service charge in a restaurant?
Yes. I've refused to pay the service charge in a restaurant.
What's another use of the word charge?
Another use of the word charge is in charging a battery, for example in a mobile phone.
How often do you have to recharge your mobile?
I have to recharge my mobile every 2 days.
Clear. As regards. Was the sky clear yesterday?
Yes, the sky was clear yesterday.
Can you make yourself clearly understood when you speak English in everyday situations?
Yes, I can make myself clearly understood when I speak English in everyday situations.
At what time of the day are the streets usually at their clearest as regards traffic?
The streets are usually at their clearest as regards traffic very early in the morning.
Who clears the tables in a restaurant?
The waiters and waitresses clear the tables in a restaurant.
Guest. Host. Hostess. Invite. If you invited me to your house, would you be my guest or my host?
If I invited you to my house, I'd be your host.
If you could play host to 3 famous guests, which 3 famous people would you choose?
If I could play host to 3 famous guests, I'd choose Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein and Marilyn Monroe.
Ridden. What are the 3 forms of ride?
The 3 forms of ride are ride, rode, ridden.
Have you ever ridden a horse?
Yes, I've ridden a horse.
Have you ever ridden a bicycle at night without lights?
No, I've never ridden a bicycle at night without lights.
Severe. If you were a judge, on what kind of criminals would you be most severe?
If I were a judge, the kind of criminals I'd be most severe on would be murderers.
Do you get very severe winters in your country?
Yes, we get very severe winters in my country.
Blow. What do people say they see when they receive a blow on the head?
People say they see stars when they receive a blow on the head.
Respect. What kind of people do you respect most?
The kind of people I respect most are doctors and scientists.
Company. Employ. Employer. Employee. If you had your own company, would you employ someone simply because they were a friend?
Yes, if I had my own company, I'd employ someone simply because they were a friend.
What do we employ to cut bread?
We employ a knife to cut bread.
What do we call a person who employs somebody to work for them?
We call a person who employs somebody to work for them an employer.
And what do we call the person who works for them?
We call the person who works for them an employee.
Machine. Accidentally. Are there a lot of machines in a factory?
Yes, there are a lot of machines in a factory.
What do we use a cash machine for?
We use a cash machine for taking money out of the bank quickly and easily.
What could happen if you accidentally put a red sock in a washing machine with white clothes?
If I accidentally put a red sock in a washing machine with white clothes, I could get pink clothes.
Flown. What are the 3 forms of fly?
The 3 forms of fly are fly, flew, flown.
Have you ever flown in a plane?
Yes, I've flown in a plane.
Draw. Drawing. Curtain. Are you good at drawing pictures?
No, I'm not good at drawing pictures.
What do we mean by a rough drawing?
By a rough drawing, we mean a very simple drawing.
What's the easiest way to draw out cash?
The easiest way to draw out cash is to use a bank card in a cash machine.
What does to draw the curtains mean?
To draw the curtains means to pull them open or closed.
Lesson 88. Perfect continuous. Present participle. If, then. Present perfect continuous. I have been working. Past perfect continuous. I had been working. Future perfect continuous. I will have been working. How do we form the perfect continuous tenses?
We form the perfect continuous tenses by using the verb have, the word been, and the present participle of the main verb.
Give me an example, please.
I have been studying for 2 hours.
When do we use the present perfect continuous?
We use the present perfect continuous to say how long an action has been in progress so far.
Give me an example, please.
I have been living in this house for 6 months so far.
When do we use the past perfect continuous?
We use the past perfect continuous to communicate the duration of an action up to a particular point in the past.
Give me an example, please.
I had been living in this house for 1 month when I bought my new bed.
When do we use the future perfect continuous?
We use the future perfect continuous to communicate the duration of an action up to a particular point in the future.
Give me an example, please.
I will have been living in this house for 8 months at the end of this year.
How long had you been sitting in this room for when I came in?
I had been sitting in this room for 5 minutes when you came in.
Since when have you been studying English?
I've been studying English since last October.
How long will you have been living in this place for when this year or season ends?
I'll have been living in this place for 6 months when this season ends.
Since when?
Since last October.
What's the difference between saying, I have been living here for 2 months and I have lived here for 2 months?
There is no important difference between saying, I have been living here for 2 months and I have lived here for 2 months.
Ruler. Who was the last ruler of your country?
The last ruler of my country was Queen Elizabeth.
Could you draw a completely straight line without the help of a ruler?
No, I couldn't draw a completely straight line without the help of a ruler.
Earth. Astronomical. Geographical. Generally speaking, what's the difference between Earth and world?
Generally speaking, the difference between Earth and world is that we use the word Earth in the astronomical sense and world in the geographical sense.
How far's the Earth from the Sun?
The Earth's about 93 million miles from the Sun, or 150 million kilometers.
What's mud?
Mud's a mixture of earth and water.
By means of. Public. Transport. By what means can we draw a straight line?
We can draw a straight line by means of a pen or a pencil and a ruler.
By what means do you come to school?
I come to school by means of a bus, train, car, etc.
Would you rather have your own means of transport than use public transport?
No, I wouldn't rather have my own means of transport than use public transport.
Why not?
Because the public transport in this city is quite good.
As a means of making money, what would you say was the best way?
As a means of making money, I'd say the best way was to go into business.
Figure. What's the best way to maintain a good figure?
The best way to maintain a good figure is to take regular exercise and eat healthily.
Who do you think was the greatest figure in history?
I think Mahatma Gandhi was the greatest figure in history.
How many figures are there in the number of your house?
There are 3 figures in the number of my house.
What kind of figure am I drawing in the air with my finger?
You're drawing a square, a circle, etc. in the air with your finger.
Couple. Adopt. If a couple can't have a child, what can they do?
if a couple can't have a child, they can adopt one.
If you went to live in another country, do you think you would quickly adopt the way of living in that country?
Yes, if I went to live in another country, I think I'd quickly adopt the way of living in that country.
Why?
Because it makes life easier.
Cruel. Who do you think was the cruelest character in history?
I think Hitler was the cruelest character in history.
College. What's a college?
A college is a kind of school, or part of a university.
Burn. If we put a piece of wood or paper into a flame, what happens to it?
If we put a piece of wood or paper into a flame, it burns.
Take a bath.
Lesson 89. Run. What are the three forms of run?
The three forms of run are run, ran, run.
What's the furthest you've ever run?
The furthest I've ever run is 5 kilometers.
Grow, grew, grown. What does the verb to grow mean?
The verb to grow means...
What are the three forms of grow?
The three forms of grow are grow, grew, grown.
At about what age does the average person stop growing physically?
The average person stops growing physically at about 20 years old.
If you grew tired, what did you do?
If I grew tired, I'd go to bed and sleep, or sit down and rest.
What kind of food is grown most of all in this part of the world?
The kind of food that is grown most of all in this part of the world is corn.
Matter. What does the word matter mean?
The word matter means...
What kind of matter is this book made of?
This book is made of paper.
Do you think that the possibility of another world war is a serious matter?
Yes, I think that the possibility of another world war is a serious matter.
Are you interested in political matters?
Yes, I'm interested in political matters.
Expect. How long do you expect to continue living in the place where you live now?
I expect to continue living in the place where I live now for about 20 years.
In a Callan Method lesson, do you expect the teacher to correct the students' mistakes?
Yes, in a Callan Method lesson, I expect the teacher to correct the students' mistakes.
Tail questions. Tail. Confirm. When do we use a tail question?
We use a tail question when we believe something is true and when we want somebody to confirm that we are right.
How do we form a tail question?
We form a tail question by repeating the first auxiliary verb from the main part of the sentence and putting it in question form.
Give me an example, please.
He is going to go out tonight, isn't he?
Right. Now I will say something, and I want you to repeat it and add a tail question. Remember that if the main part of the sentence is positive, the tail question is negative, and vice versa. He's a young man.
He's a young man, isn't he?
He isn't a young man.
He isn't a young man, is he?
You've got a very nice kitchen.
You've got a very nice kitchen, haven't you?
You haven't got a very nice kitchen.
You haven't got a very nice kitchen, have you?
You can sing.
You can sing, can't you?
You can't sing.
You can't sing, can you?
He'll be afraid.
He'll be afraid, won't he?
He won't be afraid.
He won't be afraid, will he?
They would be hungry.
They would be hungry, wouldn't they?
They wouldn't be hungry.
They wouldn't be hungry, would they?
When there is no auxiliary verb in the main part of the sentence, which verb do we use in the tail question?
When there is no auxiliary verb in the main part of the sentence, we use do in the tail question.
Give me an example, please.
They come every Thursday, don't they?
Right. Legal. If you had the right by law to do whatever you wished, what would you do?
If I had the right by law to do whatever I wished, I'd travel round the world without paying.
Do newspapers have the legal right to print stories that aren't true?
No, newspapers don't have the legal right to print stories that aren't true.
Onto. What's the difference between the words on and onto?
The difference between the words on and onto is that we can use the word on for things that are moving or still, whereas we can use the word onto only for things that are moving.
Do you think you could jump onto the table with both your feet together?
No, I don't think I could jump onto the table with both my feet together.
Have you ever tried to do something like that?
Yes, I've tried to do something like that.
Tie. Do you know how to tie a tie?
No, I don't know how to tie a tie.
Elect. In the past, was the government of a country generally elected by the people?
No, in the past, the government of a country wasn't generally elected by the people.
Lesson 90. To have something done. Homework. What does the structure, to have something done, communicate?
The structure, to have something done, communicates that we don't do the action ourselves, but that somebody else does it for us.
Give me an example, please.
I don't cut my hair myself. I have my hair cut by a hairdresser.
Do you clean your shoes yourself, or do you have them cleaned by someone else?
I clean my shoes myself.
What can we use instead of the verb to have?
We can use the verb to get instead of the verb to have.
Do very young children sometimes get their homework done for them by their parents?
Yes, very young children sometimes get their homework done for them by their parents.
Power. Powerful. Laptop. Desktop. Do you think governments generally have too much power?
Yes, I think governments generally have too much power.
Who do you think is the most powerful person in this country?
I think the Prime Minister is the most powerful person in this country.
Do laptops use more power than desktop computers?
No, laptops don't use more power than desktop computers. They use less power.
Save. Rescue. Protect. Spend. Do you spend all your money, or do you try to save some and put it in the bank?
I don't spend all my money. I try to save some and put it in the bank.
If you saw someone in difficulty in the sea, how would you try to save their life?
If I saw someone in difficulty in the sea, I'd try to save their life by swimming to them and helping them.
What does an old man carry to save himself from falling over while walking?
An old man carries a walking stick to save himself from falling over while walking.
Would you save any time if you used a different means of transport to come to school?
Yes, I'd save some time if I used a different means of transport to come to school.
When you close a computer program, does it usually remind you to save your work first?
Yes, when I close a computer program, it usually reminds me to save my work first.
Trade. Tradesman. Skill. Bake. Baker. Butcher. Builder. What kind of things does your country mainly trade in?
My country mainly trades in vegetables.
What do we usually mean by a trade?
By a trade, we usually mean a job that a person does mainly with their hands, and for which they need a special skill.
What's one of the best paid trades in your country?
One of the best paid trades in my country is the trade of a builder.
Close. Close. What's the difference between the words close and close?
The difference between the words close and close is that close is a verb meaning shut, whereas close is an adjective meaning near.
What's the closest you've ever been to real danger?
The closest I've ever been to real danger was when I fell off my bike.
Trip. Fortnight. If you went on a trip to New York, what would you see?
If I went on a trip to New York, I'd see the Statue of Liberty, Central Park, and the Empire State Building.
When people go on business trips, do their companies usually pay for everything?
Yes, when people go on business trips, their companies usually pay for everything.
Which would you prefer? An exciting trip to a big city for the weekend, or a quiet fortnight on the beach?
I'd prefer a quiet fortnight on the beach.
Every now and again. What does the expression, every now and again, mean?
The expression, every now and again, means...
Is it a good idea to give one's house a thorough cleaning from top to bottom every now and again?
Yes, it's a good idea to give one's house a thorough cleaning from top to bottom every now and again.
No longer. What do you do with clothes that you no longer wear?
I give away clothes that I no longer wear.
Island. What's an island?
An island is a piece of land completely surrounded by water.
Ocean. Atlantic. Pacific. Indian. Name me some oceans, please.
The names of some oceans are the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the Indian Ocean.
Screen. DVD. CD. Do you prefer to watch films at home on DVD or at the cinema on the big screen?
I prefer to watch films at home on DVD.
Do you buy CDs and DVDs more often in the shops or online?
I buy CDs and DVDs more often online.
Is it bad for your eyes to look at a computer screen for too long?
Yes, it's bad for your eyes to look at a computer screen for too long.
Produce. What does your country produce?
My country produces cars and vegetables.
Boast. What kind of things do people often boast about?
People often boast about their jobs, things that they own, etc.
Necessity. Is wearing a tie a necessity for some occupations these days?
Yes, wearing a tie is a necessity for some occupations these days.
Lesson 91. Tell. Say. What's the most important difference between tell and say?
The most important difference between tell and say is that after tell, we indicate the person we are speaking to, but after say, we usually do not.
Give me an example, please.
She told him that it was important. She said it was important.
After the verb say, how is it possible to indicate the person we are speaking to?
After the verb say, it's possible to indicate the person we are speaking to by using the word to.
For direct speech, which verb do we normally use, say or tell?
For direct speech, we normally use the verb say.
Give me an example, please.
She said, I'm hungry.
Which of these sentences is correct? He told me to go away, or he said me to go away.
The first sentence, he told me to go away, is correct.
Risen. What are the three forms of rise?
The three forms of rise are rise, rose, risen.
Have you ever risen before the sun has risen?
Yes, I've sometimes risen before the sun has risen.
Gain. Transaction. Degree. What's the difference between to earn and to gain?
The difference between to earn and to gain is that the verb to earn generally means to receive money for work done, whereas the verb to gain means to get more of something.
If you bought a business for £4 million and sold it later for half that amount, would you be gaining by doing so?
No. If I bought a business for £4 million and sold it later for half that amount, I wouldn't be gaining by doing so. I'd be losing.
How much would your loss be?
My loss would be £2 million.
Does your watch generally gain or lose time, or does it keep perfect time?
My watch generally loses time.
What's the best way to gain friends?
The best way to gain friends is to be nice to people.
How long does it take the average student to gain a degree at university in your country?
It takes the average student about 3 years to gain a degree at university in my country.
As regards learning a language, would you gain anything by going to the country where it was spoken?
Yes, as regards learning a language, I'd gain something by going to the country where it was spoken.
Why?
Because I'd be able to speak the language every day.
Mark. Out of. Petrol. Well known. Trademark. Are there any marks on these walls?
Yes, there are some marks on these walls.
What kind of marks are they?
They're all kinds of marks.
Who marks your dictations?
I mark my dictations myself.
How many marks did you get in your last English exam?
I got 80 marks out of 100 in my last English exam.
Which petrol company do you think has the most well-known trademark?
I think Shell has the most well-known trademark.
Base. Basis. Basic. What part of the book is this?
It's the bottom or the base of the book.
What do you consider to be the basis of a good life?
I consider good health to be the basis of a good life.
Is it normal for language learners to continue making basic grammatical mistakes even though they know the rules?
Yes, it's normal for language learners to continue making basic grammatical mistakes even though they know the rules.
What do you think is basically the difference between your own language and English?
I think that, basically, the difference between my own language and English is the pronunciation and the grammar.
Include. When you stay at a hotel for one night, does the price you pay usually include breakfast?
Yes, when you stay at a hotel for one night, the price you pay usually includes breakfast.
Brush. What do we use to clean our shoes with?
We use a shoe brush to clean our shoes with.
What other kinds of brushes are there?
There are hairbrushes, toothbrushes, paintbrushes, etc.
Box. Do you like to watch boxing?
No, I don't like to watch boxing.
Why not?
Because it's very unpleasant.
Type. What type of film do you watch most?
I watch comedies the most.
Can you type?
Yes, I can type.
How many words a minute?
About 30 words a minute.
Previous. Occasion. Wedding. Video. Have you met me on many previous occasions?
Yes, I've met you on many previous occasions.
Did you have any previous experience of the Callan Method before you came here?
No, I didn't have any previous experience of the Callan Method before I came here.
Why do people often make videos of special occasions like weddings?
People often make videos of special occasions like weddings so that they can remember them better.
Plan. Interfere. Interference. What do we mean by a street plan of a town?
By a street plan of a town, we mean a map showing the streets of the town and their names.
Do you usually write your plans in a diary?
No, I don't usually write my plans in a diary.
Do you think it's a good idea for teenagers to plan their futures while still at school?
Yes, I think it's a good idea for teenagers to plan their futures whilst still at school,
Why?
because they can consider their choices for longer.
Do you think a young person should be allowed to plan their own future without the interference of their parents?
No, I don't think a young person should be allowed to plan their own future without the interference of their parents,
Why not?
because young people don't always know what's best.
Strange looking.
Lesson 92. The two types of auxiliary verb. Primary. Modal. What are the two basic types of auxiliary verb in English?
The two basic types of auxiliary verb in English are primary auxiliaries and modal auxiliaries.
What are the primary auxiliaries?
The primary auxiliaries are the verbs be, have, and do.
When do we use the auxiliary be?
We use the auxiliary be to make the continuous tenses and the passive voice.
Give me an example, please.
I am speaking English now. This book was printed in England.
When do we use the auxiliary have?
We use the auxiliary have for the perfect tenses.
Give me an example, please.
He has gone to Scotland.
When do we use the auxiliary do?
We use the auxiliary do for the present simple and past simple.
Give me an example, please.
I don't speak Spanish. Did she eat the pasta?
What are the 10 common modals?
The 10 common modals are can, could, will, would, may, might, shall, should, must, and ought.
What ideas do modals normally express?
Modals normally express ideas about necessity or possibility.
Now, I will give you a sentence, and you say a sentence with the same meaning, but with a modal. John is able to speak French.
John can speak French.
Perhaps he works in a bank.
He may, or might, work in a bank.
It is necessary for me to go to bed now.
I must go to bed now.
You are not allowed to smoke in this building.
You can't, or mustn't, smoke in this building.
What do we put after a modal?
We put the infinitive without to after a modal.
Give me an example, please.
I must send this email today.
Which modal is the only exception to this rule?
Ought is the only exception to this rule.
Give me an example, please.
I ought to see a doctor.
Set. What does the word set mean?
The word set means
How long is the time set for a game of football?
the time set for a game of football is 90 minutes. That is 45 minutes each way.
What kind of life do you think is better? A life where you have a set time for doing everything, such as eating, sleeping, etc., or a life where you do these things whenever you want?
I think a life where you have a set time for doing everything, such as eating, sleeping, etc., is better than a life where you do these things whenever you want.
What did I set down on the table when I came into the room at the beginning of the lesson?
You set your book down on the table when you came into the room at the beginning of the lesson.
If your watch isn't showing the right time, what do you have to do?
If my watch isn't showing the right time, I have to set it right.
Sunrise. Sunset. What time is sunrise at the moment?
Sunrise is at about 7 a.m. at the moment.
And what time is sunset?
Sunset is at about 6 p.m.
Duty. Society. On duty. Off duty. Driver. Fine. What do you consider to be the duty a person owes to the society in which they live?
I consider that the duty a person owes to the society in which they live is to be honest, hard-working, etc.
What are the duties of a policeman?
The duties of a policeman are to give people help and information, catch criminals, etc.
Do policemen wear their uniforms when they're off duty?
No, policemen don't wear their uniforms when they're off duty. They only wear them when they're on duty.
If you brought a foreign car into this country, would you have to pay duty on it?
Yes, if I brought a foreign car into this country, I'd have to pay duty on it.
And if you didn't pay, what'd happen?
If I didn't pay, they might make me pay a fine, and even take the car away from me.
Various. What are the various ways of learning a language?
The various ways of learning a language are at school with a teacher, going to the country where the language is spoken, practicing with a friend, listening to the radio, watching TV, etc.
Entertainment. Is there much entertainment for teenagers in your hometown?
Yes, there is a lot of entertainment for teenagers in my hometown.
Weight. Equal. Is the weight of these two chairs about equal?
Yes, the weight of these two chairs is about equal.
Operate. Operation. Would you find it interesting to operate a factory machine?
No, I wouldn't find it interesting to operate a factory machine.
Why not?
Because you do the same thing again and again.
Have you ever had an operation in hospital?
Yes, I've had an operation in hospital.
Lesson 93. By. By the time. Give me a sentence containing the words by the time.
By the time she gets here, dinner will be ready.
What does by the time mean in that sentence?
By the time in that sentence means at some point between now and when she gets here.
By the time you are 90 years old, do you suppose your hair will be grey?
Yes, by the time I'm 90 years old, I suppose my hair will be grey.
Will your English have improved by this time next month?
Yes, my English will have improved by this time next month.
As well as. Can you speak English as well as you speak your own language?
No, I can't speak English as well as I speak my own language. I speak it worse than my own language.
Do you take English lessons on Sunday as well as during the week?
No, I don't take English lessons on Sunday as well as during the week.
What does that last question mean, in other words?
That last question means you take English lessons during the week, but do you also take English lessons on Sunday?
Elder. Eldest. What's the difference between the words older and elder?
The difference between the words older and elder is that we generally use the word elder when speaking about people in the same family, and we cannot say elder than.
Have you got an elder brother?
No, I haven't got an elder brother.
Are you the eldest in your family?
No, I'm not the eldest in my family.
Who is?
My grandfather is the eldest in my family.
Let. Rent. Advertise. In exchange for. What's the difference between to let and to rent?
The difference between to let and to rent is that to let means to lend something in exchange for money, whereas to rent means to borrow something in exchange for money.
Supposing you had a house or a flat to let, how would you advertise it?
Supposing I had a house or a flat to let, I'd advertise it in the newspaper or on the internet.
What's the average monthly rent for a small flat in this town?
The average monthly rent for a small flat in this town is about £1,000.
How much does it cost to rent a car for one day in this town?
It costs about £40 to rent a car for one day in this town.
Do you ever rent DVDs to watch at home?
Yes, I sometimes rent DVDs to watch at home.
Is it common in your country for people to rent out rooms in their house, to students, for example?
Yes, it's common in my country for people to rent out rooms in their house to students.
Fallen. What are the three forms of fall?
The three forms of fall are fall, fell, fallen.
Have you ever fallen out of bed in the middle of the night?
Yes, I've fallen out of bed in the middle of the night.
Chose. What's the past of the verb to choose?
The past of the verb to choose is chose.
Did you choose the clothes you're wearing yourself?
Yes, I chose the clothes I'm wearing myself.
Such a. Why do you suppose football is such a popular game?
I suppose football is such a popular game because it's enjoyable to play and to watch.
Why is a desert such a difficult place to live in?
A desert is such a difficult place to live in because there's so little water.
Provide. Providing. Provided. Ghost. Is a soldier's uniform provided for him by the government?
Yes, a soldier's uniform is provided for him by the government.
How do parents provide for their children?
Parents provide for their children by making sure they have all the things they need in life.
If you had just bought a house and then someone told you that there was a ghost in it, what would you do? Providing, of course, you believed in ghosts.
If I had just bought a house and then someone told me there was a ghost in it, I'd sell it, providing I believed in ghosts.
Straight. Are you going to go straight home after the lesson?
Yes, I'm going to go straight home after the lesson.
If you came to some crossroads while driving a car and, instead of stopping, you kept straight on, what might happen?
If I came to some crossroads while driving a car and instead of stopping I kept straight on, an accident might happen.
Consist. How many days does a fortnight consist of?
A fortnight consists of 14 days.
Place. Why do we have to place an egg carefully on the table?
We have to place an egg carefully on the table because it could easily break.
Commence. Academic. In which month does the academic year commence in your country?
The academic year commences in September in my country.
Colony.
Lesson 94. Appear. Disappear. Appearance. Get to know. What's my hand doing?
Your hand is appearing and disappearing from under the table.
Does it appear to you that people in the world are becoming happier or less happy?
It appears to me that people in the world are becoming less happy.
Why?
Because everybody wants more than they have.
Do you judge people by appearances, or do you wait until you get to know them well?
I don't judge people by appearances. I wait until I get to know them well.
Which way of judging is fairer?
Judging people after getting to know them well is fairer.
Double. If we double the number 25, what do we get?
If we double the number 25, we get 50.
How wide is a double bed?
A double bed is about double the width of a single bed.
Trouble. Take the trouble. Look up. Dictionary. Modern. Do you have trouble remembering all the rules of grammar in English?
Yes, I have trouble remembering all the rules of grammar in English.
When children get into trouble, do they sometimes tell lies in order to get themselves out of trouble?
Yes, when children get into trouble, they sometimes tell lies in order to get themselves out of trouble.
When you are reading a book in your own language and you see a word you don't know the meaning of, do you take the trouble to look it up in a dictionary, or do you just keep on reading?
When I'm reading a book in my own language and I see a word I don't know the meaning of, I take the trouble to look it up in a dictionary.
Do dreams sometimes trouble you at night?
Yes, dreams sometimes trouble me at night.
What do you think is the trouble with modern life?
I think the trouble with modern life is that everything is expensive and people don't have enough time.
Change of spelling with comparison of adjectives. Final. Spelling. When do we double the final consonant of an adjective in forming its comparative and its superlative?
We double the final consonant of an adjective in forming its comparative and its superlative when it ends in a single consonant preceded by a single vowel.
Give me an example, please.
Thin, thinner than, the thinnest.
What happens when an adjective ends in a consonant plus y?
When an adjective ends in a consonant plus y, the y is changed to I.
Give me an example, please.
Lucky, luckier than, the luckiest.
Though. Give me an example of the word though, please.
I didn't like the food he cooked. I ate it, though. Though she was feeling ill, she went on the business trip.
Delay. When you have something unpleasant to do you delay doing it, or do you do it at once without delay?
When I have something unpleasant to do, I delay doing it.
Which is better, though, to delay doing things, or to do things at once without delay?
It's usually better to do things at once without delay.
When pupils are late for lessons, what kind of things have usually delayed them?
When pupils are late for lessons, the kind of things that have usually delayed them are oversleeping, transport, etc.
Across. Come across. Forest. What must you do before you walk across the road?
I must look both ways before I walk across the road.
What can you see across the street, or road, field, etc., from this window?
I can see another building across the street from this window.
If you can't get across a river by bridge, how can you get across?
If you can't get across a river by bridge, you can get across by boat or by swimming across.
If you were walking in a forest and suddenly came across a tiger, what did you do?
If I were walking in a forest and suddenly came across a tiger, I'd stand completely still.
Work. Tell. If a lift isn't working, what do we have to do?
If a lift isn't working, we have to take the stairs.
Do you think it's possible to tell a person's character just by looking at their face?
No, I don't think it's possible to tell a person's character just by looking at their face.
Can we often tell where somebody comes from by their accent?
Yes, we can often tell where somebody comes from by their accent.
Luggage. Check in. Check out. Reception. Receptionist. When you arrive at a hotel, where do you check in?
When you arrive at a hotel, you check in at the reception desk.
And what does the receptionist hand you when you finish checking in?
The receptionist hands you the key to the room when you finish checking in.
On the day you leave a hotel, what time do you usually have to check out by?
On the day you leave a hotel, you